Hey everyone, welcome to our podcast. This is my story where we talk about the weird reality of rad. If you're one of our loyal listeners, welcome back. If you're new to our podcast, welcome here. It's great to have you join us here today for this episode. This podcast is interviews with parents, kids, and professionals who come on here to share their stories on a wide range of experiences with us, anything from their craziest happenings to their journeys of healing. Today is Tuesday, June 16th. This is our 16th episode, and we have Joanne Couture back here with us today from Laloba Services, and she's going to talk about how brainwave optimization can help kids. So she talks about their brain function, how this can help them to relax and pay attention and focus better, and she also talks about the 30-70 brain model, which is very fascinating and can really give some good insight for parents to how their kids' brains are functioning. So we're really excited to have Joanne back here with us for this third part on brainwave optimization, so let's get into it. All right, Joanne, welcome back for our third episode on brainwave optimization. For anyone who didn't get to hear our first two episodes or haven't listened to them yet, do you want to quickly tell us who you are and maybe a little bit about what brainwave optimization is before we jump into how it can help kids?
Okay. Good morning, Karen. I'm Joanne Couture, marriage and family therapist from Winnipeg, and have been doing therapy for 20 years. Realizing that talk therapy sometimes doesn't always bring the results that clients want, because we may know what we need to do and end up not doing it because we're reacting to things rather than. So that research got me going, as I said before, into the work of trauma and how it affects the body and how it stays stuck. We react in our body, and that, of course, influences and has responses in our brain function that we may want them to be different. Mm-hmm. So that got me going with, so 10 years ago, I brought in brainwave optimization into my office to help people's brains function better so that then they can make better choices. And so since then, so that's 2009 is when, and brainwave optimization was founded in 2004. And then research has been done because anything that's new is not easily recognized. So there's a university in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, the Wake Forest University. It's a neurology department that's well known across the States. They are doing research and really showing the benefits of brainwave optimization. So I'm really glad I brought it to Winnipeg. I'm
glad you did too.
And it's young. It's a young technology, and anything that's new brings a lot of skepticism and fear. And so I'm glad you're letting us talk about it here so that more people can know and use it.
Yeah. Like I've told you in some of our other episodes, I think everybody should use brainwave optimization. But I can really see, especially the benefits for parents we talked about last week on our episode, and for kids who have suffered trauma and their brains are just so scrambled that things like you mentioned, like talk therapy, doesn't make any sense to them when their brain can't take it in.
No, they're not. Their brain function isn't developed yet enough, and that's what we'll be looking at today, in the whole sense of a child's brain is much more in the receiving mode than in the executive mode. That's why we go to school, or that's the process of growing up, that the executive functioning part makes us different from the animal world.
Yeah.
Because when we think of parenting and with children, just by being those parents, we are training our children. And I said earlier before in another interview, my parents never taught me Chinese.
Right.
I learned French. Okay.
Yep.
And then when I went to school, I started to learn English. So in our families, we learn the family traditions, we learn the language, we learn the culture that is there. So that is the world that we shape our children in. It's in that world that children learn what's appropriate and what isn't. We expect, when you look at brain development, you expect kids to go from, the 2-year-old tantrums. We expect that. And then, you also have the teenager tantrums. We expect that. But we do like to see that evolution of that curious 5-year-old who's able to control his or her emotions. And if that can grow and we can support that, children get to learn how to manage emotions and their behavior. And when they're in that capacity, we often talk about the teenage years and how challenging it is for us because they keep pushing our edges, and necessarily so, because they're wanting to get out of the box. That tradition that we gave them, teenagers, it's their job to push our edges and to help us push forward into something new. And when they can manage their emotions, when we've been able to help them manage their emotions and understand their behaviors, we're going to be able to have a conversation and not, outright panics and fights and, people walking out on each other.
Yeah.
So self-regulation is what's important. And self-regulation is that balance between being and doing. And, the being part of our brain is all about receiving. So brainstem, up our everything. When I feel something in my body, that information goes up through the vagus nerve into our brain. And the back of our brain is all about receiving and processing all that information. So 70% of our brain is actually just internal processing from what I'm hearing right now, what I'm seeing, what I'm sensing. The doing part is the executive and performance part, and that's only about 30% of our brain. And so quite often when our child's doing is not up to standards, okay, they're not fitting into our culture, they're not fitting into our family standards, then we have different drills, we do different things with them, so that we can encourage or help them learn that 30% of thinking capacity. So sometimes, like you're saying with your work, if that 30%, if I can't get them thinking, then I have to attend to the processing part. I have to go attend to the 70%. Because if I don't attend to the kid's body and what they're receiving, that 30% is always going to be offline.
Right.
So the 30% is the conscious, 70% is the unconscious part. And that's why children are very perceptive. Now, kids feel things.
Oh, yeah.
Real quick. They walk into a room and they know something's right or they know something's wrong. They know. They can't put words to it, though, because that's that 30% capacity that's not trained, or it's not formed, it's not evolved yet. So, our brain evolves until we're 20, 21 with regard to that executive functioning. So when we talk about something's not quite right, it might be, we talk about why are they off kilter? Well, life happens. We don't know before our child was born, in utero. We don't know after, because they can't tell us. They don't have that capacity to be able to transfer that information for us. So they're just physical in it. So, it's a broad picture. Poverty can, we're talking here in Winnipeg, poverty issues. A mother living with depression, a father with addictions, violence in the family, complications at birth. Anything that raises a bit of fear or anxiety. When we look at school, we often talk about bullying and the abuse that goes on there. Anything that triggers fear, losing a loved one, and that could be my dog, my hamster, feeling betrayed, accidents, falling off my bike. I had, geez, I could go all kinds of stories here. Somebody says, they came in for an assessment, and he can't sleep. He has not been able to sleep for years. So we started looking at, did you ever have a brain injury? No. Okay, well, what about, and then all of a sudden he thought, at 5 or 6 years old, he'd fallen off his bike and woke up in the hospital because he was, concussion.
Yeah.
And it's after that he had night terrors. He had, and hasn't been able to sleep since, to have a really good sleep. So sometimes it's physical, something physical. It's not anybody's fault. It just happens. Yeah. Financial hardships sometimes can cause stress in a family. Like we talked last week about how as parents, sometimes we can be short. I mean, that's where we need to be able to forgive ourselves and, and go, okay, now what? What do I do?
Right.
All kinds of stuff can create emotional stress that leaves a child with a compromised brain function. Because if I can't help a child just be able to be and be comfortable in their being so that they can learn to do, then that connection between being and doing won't happen. So we need to be able to learn, just to be able to help them be. And that's a lot of the work that you're doing, from what I'm hearing anyway.
Yeah.
So trauma leaves an imprint on the brain, which is very connected to our autonomic nervous system. So, quite often, kids have a headache, or they'll have nausea, they have stomach pain. At that time, we know something physical is going on. So we attend to it. But emotionally, sleep disturbances, they might be moody, they might, be angry for what we would think no reason at all. The little tantrums. At school, they might not be able to concentrate. They might have low self-esteem. Besides checking to see if their vision is okay, frustration, sometimes it's just, I can't see what's on the blackboard, or I'm dyslexic. It could be an eye issue. So anything like that, when your brain doesn't function like it should, you're going to have lack of clarity. You're going to have anxiety. You're going to have brain fog. You're going to have overstimulation because you just can't stop the train. And so, when we look at our kids' activation, as parents, we got all kinds of different ways. We hold them, we distract them, we redirect their attention. When we see there's aggression, or it's my toy, or whatever, disrespect between them, or disobedience. When as a parent I can be calm, sometimes my silence is the best tool. If I can just be quiet and not scream, if I can just be quiet, what I'm actually doing when I'm being quiet is going into my being, so that my 30% prefrontal cortex has a chance to operate. And when I do that, I'm actually modeling to this child that same thing.
Right.
So it gives time for that integration of what's going on there in that 70% feeling emotional, or that gut sense that's
Mm-hmm.
going on in that 70%. So when somebody's calm, they have, that it's like a grounded space where learning can happen.
Yeah.
And we can teach kids that simple techniques of breathing awareness. There's all kinds of little tricks to do muscle relaxation, progressive muscle relaxation with kids, and all of a
Yeah.
sudden they find themselves, oh, I'm okay.
Mm-hmm.
Visualizations, fun little visualizations that are good to do. So that they can get a sense of that 70% of agitation, when they can recognize it, they can learn how to use that cognitive capacity to be able to calm that 70% that's
Mm-hmm.
dysregulated.
Yeah.
So, when that doesn't happen, as a parent, we start questioning our capacity as a parent, because we can't help them self-regulate.
Mm-hmm.
And studies show, that parents of children with ADHD, for instance, are frequently less warm. They're less effective with their children because, and they can be more aggressive in their discipline, just because we're trying to manage our kids' strong reactions and disruptions. And
Mm-hmm.
so often we turn to pharmaceuticals. It can be the answer we need. Unfortunately, sometimes it's easier to medicate a child than to learn new ways of being. And
Yep.
it's in the being that's different, So behavioral therapy, nutrition, somatosensory therapy for children is sometimes, it's work. Organizing parent-teacher programs so that we can help these children take a non-pharmaceutical approach.
Mm-hmm.
And that's usually more expensive, unfortunately, because our medical system isn't set up. Our medical system is set up for pharmaceuticals.
Yeah.
And so if we want to get below that into the real stuff and look at developmental, to me, it's a developmental delay. It's just that something's been stalled out. So we need to engage it to be able to get that 70-30% working together so that the kid can be self-regulated and be responsible for themselves and create a future.
Yeah.
Rather than be reactive all the time. So with brainwave optimization, we really identify those out of balance, counterproductive brainwave activities, and we can see it. And I often call it for children, it's music therapy, because you just help the child sit there and let them listen to their own brain making music. And when we do that, that music helps the brain reset itself into improved performance, because the functioning is now flowing.
Mm-hmm.
So in past, brainwave optimization since 2004, many affiliates across the States and Canada have been working with children as well. And so, just for example, the mother of a 9-year-old reported a significant improvement in her child's academic performance and overall well-being over the course of the 3 years after using this technology. So before her 8th grade, she was reevaluated and moved from a special education program to regular grade classroom where she excelled.
Wow.
Just because that brain capacity shifted into something that she was then able to manage and keep on tracking.
Right. Yeah.
So brainwave optimization is not about teaching or reaching certain standards or passing tests. Like I'm not teaching things.
Mm-hmm.
It is about helping the brain develop optimal activity patterns that supports the learning process. It's the learning process, you reminded me at the beginning about my image. I come from the farm,
Mm-hmm.
and the whole barn image, um, you know, anytime you have a barn, you're sure to have cows. And if you're going to have cows, you're sure going to have milking, and you're going to have those cows coming in morning and night. And when you call them, you're going to have cow paths towards the barn.
Mm-hmm.
So when we're talking about trauma, when we're talking about the different, if a child's activity is, tantrums and frustration, that's the brain pattern in this child. So we want to shift that. Well, when they're frustrated, that's not when you start talking to them, trying to train them into something different.
Yep.
So when they sit in the chair with Brainwave Optimization, through that music therapy, we are creating more possibilities, because as the neurons branch out and reroute into different thicker roots, we now have those roots reaching out and creating new pathways between each other. So now we're actually having the possibility of a new barn that is a self-regulation barn, not a frustration barn. And those new pathways, so the child will know which one feels better.
Yeah.
They're going to know that this feels better, therefore I'm going to do this. I'm going, whatever. Kids are smart.
Yep.
So brainwave optimization does that. It is about caring for the brain as a central organ of learning and taking advantage of neuroplasticity.
Mm-hmm.
So it can transform a chronic disorder that usually requires medication into a resolvable issue without medication. It works at helping the brain in its internal 70-30 communication. And when that happens, your child has self-regulation. They have a better perception of themselves. They feel in charge of their life. Yeah, they can take responsibility. Like they're themselves, not antsy.
Yes.
Ants in their pants. Got to get those ants out of the pants.
Yeah, that's great. I think that 70-30 balance makes it a much more understandable way to think about it.
Mm-hmm.
That, our kids are just not using that part of the brain, or they're too much in this part. And when we can get that balance, that's when they can start making good choices and, do all the fun stuff that kids can do without getting frustrated.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And then I know just before we started the interview, we were talking a little bit about ages, and you said this can be done on even babies.
So as long as a child can sit in a chair, with a little bit of help, in the sense of the parent can be there, I can be there to help them. Sometimes some kids come and do their homework. Sometimes I get them doing puzzles, coloring. We might work 10 minutes. And that might be the end of the session. Compared to with adults, we at least do an hour of training. But with children, we go according to them. So, parents and me, we have to be flexible as to what's appropriate. And I mean, teenagers, of course, are easier because they understand better sometimes.
Right.
Sometimes. Yeah. So I wouldn't school age for sure.
Mm-hmm.
It depends on what the parent wants, and I think it's for anybody.
Yeah.
You just go according to, you just pace it. We would pace it differently.
Mm-hmm. So kind of a much more tailored approach to what the child needs, even day by day or halfway through the session.
And with adults, we make sure that we use the whole brain. Well, with kids, we might just do the frontal poles and the temporals. That's it.
Okay.
That might be just enough. Just because that's all they can take anyway.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's great.
There's also, we never talked about it, but there's also a headband that can be used at home.
Okay.
And that might be a really good option for some families where with the headband, I think up to 5 people can use the same tablet.
Okay.
And So the headband really helps to address the frontal poles, so our emotional center and our arousal centers. So parents and children could, everybody could use a little bit of music therapy.
Yeah.
And just help things calm down.
Yeah, that might be a really good option, especially
Yeah,
if families have several children or,
exactly. Yeah,
live far enough away that it's not feasible to come in all the time.
exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
For anybody who's outside of Winnipeg, I often recommend the headband because it is it's an in-home support
Mm-hmm.
for that self-management part of our brain. And
Right.
the info office is, let's look at the bigger picture of the brain and, balance more of it.
Right. So do those two things, do you have to come to the in-office before the headband, or is the headband something they can do separately?
They can do it separately, but I would say use it with support by somebody like a brain coach,
Right.
because it's about learning how to use the technology and
Yeah.
not you see, quite often, because we don't have that 30% capacity of sensing, or 70%, sometimes we need a brain coach to help us recognize what I'm sensing.
Yeah.
So to be able to put words on what I'm sensing. So sometimes people use the headband and don't have that capacity yet of recognizing that what's happening in me might be okay, or
Right.
it might not be.
Yeah.
Like, how much do we use the headband? So it is about building that 30-70 again. You're using the same thing as with children here, in my own capacity of reading what's appropriate with regard to the headband. Because some
Yeah.
people using the headband, it might be, I had one client, she would use it at night, well then she couldn't sleep, so she had to
Oh,
learn to use the headband in the morning
right.
because it activated her.
Yeah.
So those are all things, it's a learning, it's about being attentive. It's that whole self-awareness all the time. That's what's going to get it. That's that self-regulation, is that self-awareness. And you know what? Unfortunately, I think as a society, we don't talk about self-awareness. We talk
Oh,
about, this is how you should be,
exactly.
So
Yeah.
it's a different therapy when you're looking at self-awareness.
It is. Yeah. All right. Yeah, that's great information. And how can people get a hold of you if they're interested in more information or booking sessions with you, or even information about the headbands?
Okay. Just to talk to me, and I do consults. I do, people can come in and do a consult, and just to see what it is. So I'm at in Winnipeg, 204-612-1579. That's 1579 at 612. So, call or check me on my website. It's La Loba. So if you just Google La Loba Services, I'll come up. But LaLobaTraumaRelease.com. I claim trauma release, because when we think of that barn pathway, if that pathway is not of benefit to me, that's a trauma. So I need to release it and open up new pathways. So LaLobaTraumaRelease.com is my website. I've got a info blog on my website. There's a blog on the Safe Harbor website. There's podcasts there as well.
Okay.
So do your research, and then they can look at Brain State Technologies in Scottsdale, or
Okay.
even go to Wake Forest University and check out the research that's there. It's there. It's just waiting for it to be recognized, the same way pharmaceuticals are.
Waiting for people to find it.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, that's all great information. And I'll put all the links for your contact and Safe Harbors down below so people can find that.
And that the headband too, it's through Brain State Technologies. Yeah. We can put that on.
Okay. Yeah, that'd be good. All right. So thank you again for doing this last interview with us about brainwave optimization. First one we did was what brainwave optimization is and does, and then one about parenting, and then this one about helping kids. So really kind of a full approach to getting the brains working in an entire family. Yeah. So thank you so much for joining us. Alright, that brings us to the end of our interviews with Joanne about brainwave optimization. This was the third part of our 3-part series, so if you haven't listened to the first and second parts, you can do that. They're episodes 14 and 15 on our channel. The 14th episode is about brainwave optimization. The 15th episode is about brainwave optimization for parents. So that one's really great if you haven't listened to it yet. So thank you for joining us here today on this episode. Make sure you check out the description. We've put Joanne's information down there, as well as a link to the Safe Harbor website where you can listen to their podcasts and information they have on all of their services. And we've also added a link down below if you're interested in the headband that Joanne mentioned. You can check it out there. And we also have information about our podcast and the Radish Ranch in the description with the other links. If you haven't already, make sure you're subscribed to our channel and you've turned on notifications so you can get our episodes straight to your inbox every Tuesday morning. And be sure to check out our Facebook page as well as our Instagram account where we post daily on there with great information for parents about reactive attachment disorder and therapeutic parenting. The songs on our podcast are The Way Things Go and Come Down, both written and recorded by French Press and used here with their permission. This Is My Story is brought to you by the Radish Ranch. I'm your host, Karen Poitras, and I will see you next week. Stay awesome.